Okay guys, we just implemented this like post. Now let's work on how you can leave a comment. So as you can see, our comment section is a new model. So if I click it, we will have this model, and inside here we are going to have this all stuffs. So you can see we have a header, this text area, we are going to add them. Okay, and if I click this button, now you can see my comment will be printed here, and we will have this push notification, and also I can edit my comment here. So you can see we will have a new box here. I can say okay, and I can update it here, and also I can remove this comment from here. Okay, now let's implement it. Okay, I don't need this post, so I'm gonna get rid of this here, and I'm going to open this single post, and we are going to delete it from here also. Okay, so down here, down this recommended post, we are going to have a new component, and I'm gonna call this comments. Okay, now let's make this component. Inside this comments, I'm going to have a new component. Okay, now let's import it here. Alright, now as you can see we have this comment, but this is supposed to be a model, I mean a sidebar. So I'm going to open this here, and I'm going to change this div to be a reusable model. So we have already made that component. Okay, so let's have our useState hook, and let's make it true by default. Okay, so set model should be show model, and model should be show model. Okay, now you can see here is our model. Now inside it we need to have a section. Okay, and this section will be in charge of this sidebar. As you can see, it should be position absolute, and we are going to set it to the right side. So in here I'm going to write a class name, but because we need to add some dynamic class name, I'm going to use this temporary string. The position should be fixed, not absolute. Tab 0, right should be 0, and also bottom 0. Okay, we need to have a z index of 50, and bg should be white, weight should be 22 rem. Okay, and we need to have some shadows here. So shadows is our CSS class, we add it on our own, and padding should be 5. Okay, now we need to have overflow here. So overflow y should be auto. This is because we need to have a scroll bar. As you can see, if we have, let's say, long comments here, it should add a new sidebar for us. Okay, so following that, we need to have our transition all, duration should be 500. Okay, now you can see here is our sidebar. So let's add this header. As you can see, we have this response with the length of our comments, and also this icon here. So inside this section I'm going to add my header, and it will go inside this div. So the first one will be a heading tree with the text of responses. Okay, and we are going to add the length of our comments here. For now it should be 1. Okay, this div will have a class name of flex, item center, and justify should be between. Okay, now let's add our icons. So I'm going to have a new button here, and the icon should be, and it's coming from. Okay, now let's check it. As you can see, we have these responses and this icon. So this heading tree will have a class name of textxl. Okay, and font weight should be bold. For this button, we are going to have a class name of TextXL. Okay, now let's close this model. So down here we need to set a condition. I'm going to say if show model is true, then we are going to write here translate x and 0, otherwise it should be translate x and 23 rem. Okay, so we are going to push it to the right side. So we made a mistake here, and this set model should be set show model here. Okay, now you can see we have our model, but if I click here, you can see our model will be pushed to the right side. Okay, and let's close this model using this icon. So in here, I'm going to add a new onClick function, and let's add our arrow function set show model should be false. Okay, now if I click this icon, you can see the model will be closed. Alright, now let's add this box. As you can see, we should print our user data here and also the text area. Okay, so at first we are going to add our comment text area here. So our comment text area will be shown only when the user is authenticated. So in here I'm going to get this current user, and it's coming from our context API. Okay, so down this div we need to write here comment form. Okay, and in here we need to set a condition. So if the user is authenticated, then we are going to show this data here. So now let's have our div inside. Okay, this div will have a class name of shadows, padding 3, margin y 5, overflow should be hidden. Okay, now inside here, as you can see, we should have our username and this user profile. So at first let's have an image tag. Okay, and for now let's set it to be profile.jpg. Okay, and the alt is going to be user image, and we need to have a heading 3 for our username, and let's say for now Amir Khan. Okay, so later on we can change this data. I'm going to write a class name here which should be toRem, height toRem, object should be cover, and also we need to set the rounded to be full. For this heading 3, we are going to make it capitalized, and also text size should be small. Okay, here is our data. We need to make them beside each other. So for that I need to wrap it inside a separate div. Okay, and let's have a class name for this, flex. Okay, and items should be center. We need to add a gap of 2, and margin bottom should be 5. Okay, now you can see they are beside each other. Alright, now let's have this text area. So down this div we are going to have a text area. Okay, so we don't need any of these attributes. Instead I'm gonna have a class name of width full, outline should be none, and it shouldn't be resizable, so resize should be none. Okay, and text small, we need to have a border, padding x 2, and padding top should be 4. Okay, now here is our text area. We need to have a placeholder for this, so let me have a placeholder here, and the placeholder is going to be okay. Now you can see we have this placeholder here. Okay, and down this placeholder we are going to have 2 buttons. So again we are going to add them inside a separate div with the class name of flex, item center, and justify should be end, because we are going to push that to the end of our div, and gap is going to be 4. So now let's have two buttons inside it. So the first button is going to be console, and the second button is going to be response. Okay, now you can see we have them here. So for this console button, I'm going to have a class name and text should be small. Now for this response, we are going to have a class name of btn and the text should be extra small. Okay, and also bg should be green and 700. Okay, now let's check it. Now you can see here is our button. We need to change the color and give it a border radius. So text should be white and rounded is going to be full. Okay, as you can see, here is our button and it's looking similar to this one. Okay, and also we need to have a little margin from the top. So for this button div, I can say margin top of 1 rim. Okay, now you can see we have enough spaces between the placeholder and the buttons. Okay, and finally we need to print all our comments here, but before that let's implement this comment, and also let's print our user data here. So up here, as you can see, we have our current user, and also if you remember, I have pasted all the users data inside my context API. It was all users. So in here I'm going to say get user data, and I'm going to say all users dot find user dot id is equal to this current user dot uid. Okay, so here is my user data, and down here I'm going to set a condition here. So we either print this get user data dot user image, or we are going to print this profile image. So if we don't have any user image, we are going to print this profile.jpg. okay, and this one should be get user data dot username. Okay, now you can see here is our username and the user profile. Now let's make a function to add a new comment. So at first we need to have a use.hook to get the value of my text area. So up here I'm going to say comment set comment. Okay, and it will be empty string by default. So let's have a value of comment and an on change of set comment, and it should be e dot target dot value. Okay, this is how we can get our data. So down here I'm going to make a new function and call it write comment. Okay, this should be an asynchronous function, and inside here we're going to have a try and catch block. So at first let's validate this comment. I'm going to say if comment is equal to this empty string, then we are going to send a toast notification here dot error. Okay, and following that we are going to have our reference again. So comment ref is equal to our collection. Now let's have our DB at first, and then we are going to make a sub collection inside this post collection, and we need to have our post ID. Post ID we are going to get it, don't worry. So inside this single post I'm going to get this post ID. Okay, and let's copy this from here, and we need to receive it inside this comments. So now we need to write our sub collection name. It should be comments. Okay, so this is how we can make a sub collection. Now let's add this sub collection inside our database. At doc, our comment ref be the first argument, and the second argument will be our comment data. So the first data is going to be this comment text, and it should be comment useState hook, and we need to have a created date. It will be date.now. Following that, we need to send our user ID. So user ID will be current user dot uid. Okay, now let's send this toast notification again dot success comment has been added. Okay, and we need to have this error message here. It should be error and error.message. Okay, and finally this set comment back to be empty string. Okay, this is our function. Now let's add it inside this button. So as you can see, we have this response button. I'm going to say on click, and we need to add this function inside it. And for this cancel button, we need to have an on click, and we just set this comment to be empty string. So we just clear this text area. So if I write something here, it will clear it. Okay, so now let's add a new comment. Let's say we have new comments here, and if I click this response, now you can see comment has been added. So if I open this database, as you can see, we have a new comment here with this ID, and here is our comment text. Okay, our date and this user ID. Alright, now let's display it similar to this one. So at first we're going to get this data using useEffect hook. So up here I'm going to have a new useState hook, and I'm gonna call this comment data and set comment data. Okay, and it should be equal to useState hook and empty array by default. Okay, so let's minimize this. Okay, so we are going to use our custom hook again. So in here I'm going to say data and loading. It will be used single fetch. So the first argument should be our collection name. It was post. We need to send our ID. So the ID was post ID, and our sub collection name was comments. Okay, let's console log this data here. If I inspect the browser, as you can see, we have one data, and here is our comment. Alright, down here, so at first we need to show a message if the user has no comments. So in here I'm going to say if we have data and this data dot length is equal to 0, then we are going to display a message inside this paragraph, and we are going to say that this, so if this post has no comments, then this message will be displayed. Otherwise we are going to map through this data. So I'm going to say data.map. We are going to get each and every item here and the index, and down here if we have any loading, we are going to say if we have loading, then we are going to display this loading component. Otherwise we want to have a new component called comment, and we are going to send this item to this component, and key should be this index. Okay, and that's it. So now let's have our component. So inside this comments I'm going to add this component here. Okay, so now let's import it here. Okay, seems we have an error because we need to say if we have data here. Alright, now you can see we have one comment here. Now let's work on this one. At first I'm going to change this to be section. Okay, so as you can see we should print our user's data here, and also we need to have this button that will have a drop down here, and finally we should print our comment text here. So at first let's add our user data here. So inside here I'm going to have a new div with the class name of flex, items center, and gap should be 5. Okay, and also this section will have a class name of border bottom. Okay, so now we need to have some props here. The first one is item. I'm gonna rename it to be post, and also we need the post ID here. Now let's send this post ID equal to this post ID. Okay, so to write our user data, if you remember, inside our comments we have stored the user ID here. So based on this user ID we are going to find his data. So again in here I'm going to get this all users from our block context. Okay, so in here I'm going to say get user data, and it's going to be equal to this all user. It should be users dot find, and user dot id is equal to this post dot user id, and it's not post but it should be comment. Okay, I am going to rename it here, and inside this div I'm going to have an image. We are going to print this get user data dot user image, or we are going to print this profile dot jpg. Okay, for this alt we are going to say user image. Okay, so our image will have a class name of width trim, height should be trim, object cover, and we're going to have this rounded full. Okay, you can see here is my user profile image. Okay, and following that, as you can see, we should add this username and the created date. Also we should have this icon here. So I'm going to add both of them on a separate div so we can add a justify between them. So down here I'm going to have a div with the class name of flex1 flex, and justify should be between. Okay, so now let's have a div for our username and that created date. So our username should go inside this heading too, and I'm going to say get user data dot username. Okay, and it should have a class name of text small, and it should be capitalized. Following that we need to have a paragraph. Okay, and we are going to import the moment library again. So I'm going to destructure all the data inside this comment here. Okay, and we're going to get the user ID, comment text, and also our created here. Okay, so I'm going to add this created here and from now. Okay, now you can see this comment has been added 18 minutes ago. Now let's give a class name for this paragraph. Text should be small and text color should be gray and 400. Okay, now let's add this button. So outside of this div we are going to have another div with a class name of relative, because we need to have a drop down here. So in here we are going to show this icon only when the user ID matching. So you can see the user ID of this user is not matching with my user ID, I cannot see this icon here. So at first I'm going to import this current user here, okay, and inside this div I'm going to say if the user is logged in and current user dot uid is equal to this user id, which is coming from our comment, then we are going to print this icon. So this icon will go inside a fragment, and we need to have a button for this, and the button text should be this icon. Let's import it. Okay, it should be current user, okay, up here also current user. Now you can see here is my icon. So this button will have a class name of text to Excel, and for hover effect it should have an opacity of 70. Okay, so inside this button we are going to have our drop down. So I have added this fragment and this relative, so let's add this drop down component here, and inside here we are going to have two reusable buttons here, okay, and it will have this on click function, and also our title should be, and we need to have another button, and this time it should be delete. Okay, now let's make this button down here. Okay, and we are going to receive click and title here. So let's print this title, and let's have a class name for this, padding 2. For hover effect it should be bg gray and 200. Text should be black with the opacity of 80 with full. Text should be small, and align text should be left. Alright, now this drop down is not visible, so we need to have a use state hook to make it visible. So up here I'm going to say drop, set drop, and it's gonna be use state hook, and it will be true by default, so we can see what's going on. Now if I open this drop down, you can see we need to have our show drop and set show drop, and also we need to have a dynamic size. So in here I'm going to say the show drop is equal to this drop use state hook, and set show drop is equal to the set drop use state hook. Okay, and we need to have a size. Okay, and for this size width should be 10 rem. Okay, now you can see here is my drop down. So let's have an on click function for this icon. So in here I'm going to say on click set drop should be not drop. Okay, now if I click this icon, you can see I'm able to open this drop down here. So now let's print our comment text here. Okay, so down this div we are going to have a paragraph, and I'm going to print this comment text inside it. Okay, this paragraph will have a class name, padding y4, and text should be small. Okay, now you can see here is my comment similar to this one, but if I add, let's say, a long comment here, now you can see we have a long text here, but it's not displaying all of them, and instead we are going to have this button. If I click it, you can see it will show all the text. Okay, and I can toggle between long and small text here, so we can implement it. Okay, so instead of this comment text, at first I need to have a use state hook up here, so I'm gonna name this more and set more button. Okay, and it should be equal to use state hook, and it will be false by default. Okay, So down here inside this paragraph, we need to set a condition. So if more is true, then we are going to print all the comment text. Otherwise, we are going to print this comment text dot substring. Okay, and we are going to get from 0 index up to 100 index. It should be small letter. And for now, let's close this drop down here. Okay, and so now if I add this long text, I'm gonna copy all of them from here and let's add it here. You can see we have this text. So down this one, down this condition, we need to set another condition. We are going to say if comment text dot length is greater than 100, then we are going to print a button here. Okay, and let's have this button, and the button text will also be a condition. So if more is true, it should be dot dot less, otherwise it should be more. Okay, now you can see we have this button because the text is long text, but we don't have that button down here. Okay, so now we need to set an on click to this button. I'm going to say on click, and from here I'm going to set this more to be not more. Okay, so now if I click this button, you can see I'm able to toggle between true and false here. Alright, we should have a little padding top here, so I'm going to say padding top is going to be 1 rem. Okay, now it's looking good. So if I add more comments here, now you can see we have this bar here. Alright,